Supporters of the historical status quo list 4 primary reasons that Brushy Bill Roberts wasn't Billy the Kid. 1. That Brushy Bill Roberts was illiterate and Billy the Kid wasn't. 2. That Brushy Bill couldn't speak Spanish and Billy the Kid was quite fluent in Spanish. 3. That Brushy Bill Roberts claimed to have been a member of the James Gang before claiming to be Billy the Kid. And 4. That he was really Oliver P. Roberts and wasn't old enough to be Billy the Kid. I have already made videos debunking the question of literacy and that he couldn't speak Spanish, and will include the links below. In my next video, I will address the Oliver P. Roberts myth. During my more than 30 years of researching Roberts' claim, one of the most absurd yet persistent claims made by those who support maintaining the historical status quo is that Brushy Bill Roberts once claimed to be a member of the James Gang. When I began this series, I didn't plan on covering this subject, as most serious researchers and historians have abandoned making this ridiculous claim due to its primary source, or should I say, lack thereof. It begins in September of 1949, when Brushy Bill Roberts attended the Jesse James birthday party celebration in Stanton, Missouri. The party received a lot of press, and several newspaper reporters, researchers, authors, and historians were in attendance, and the event was even covered by the Maury Davidson radio program, which was broadcast on CBS Radio. The radio broadcast featured interviews with Brushy Bill Roberts, Colonel James R. Davis, John Trammell, and Jesse James' claimant, J. Frank Dalton. Roberts was also interviewed by authors Henry J. Walker, Frank Hall, newspaper reporter Joe Wood of the St. Louis Globe-Democrat, and renowned columnist Robert Ruark, who later stated he believed Dalton to be the real Jesse James. Not once did Roberts ever make the claim that he was a member of the James Gang. So what did he say? During the interviews, Roberts stated that his father fought with Jesse James in the Civil War, and that he met Dalton in 1894, again in 1904 at the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri, and again in 1920 at Gladewater, Texas, where Dalton was recuperating from an illness and both men resided. That is it. Not once did Roberts claim to have ever been a member of the James Gang. However, he did say that he believed that J. Frank Dalton was the real Jesse James. Following the party and the national interest it garnered, several of the party's participants were invited to appear on the popular radio program We the People, which featured acclaimed journalist Dorothy Kilgallen and was broadcast from New York City. During the broadcast, which focused primarily on Dalton and his 2 purported gang members, James R. Davis and John Trammell, only briefly mentioned Roberts as a friend of Dalton's. Joe Wood of the St. Louis Globe-Democrat described Roberts' appearance as being, quote, quiet and not saying much, end quote. Unlike James R. Davis and John Trammell, Roberts never signed any affidavits in support of Dalton, nor did he appear to testify on Dalton's behalf at his hearing to establish his identity in March 1950 at Union, Missouri. The James Gang claim myth was born from a simple newspaper error in which a newspaper reporter confused the identities of Brushy Bill Roberts and Colonel James R. Davis, who did claim to have been a member of the James Gang. According to author Gene Fowler in Mavericks, A Guide to Texas Characters, Fowler states that the story originated from an Austin American-Statesman article which identified Roberts as a former James Gang member and Colonel James R. Davis as a former U.S. Marshal. Fowler, who is not a supporter of Brushy Bill Roberts, concedes, quote, it's possible that the paper got the description of Brushy Bill's claimed identity wrong, end quote. James R. Davis was a longtime friend of Dalton and did claim to be a member of the James Gang, stating in the Maury Davidson interview that he was with Jesse from his early days with Bloody Bill Anderson all the way up to the killing of Charlie Bigelow, which resulted in Jesse James faking his death. He also signed multiple affidavits and did interviews with Henry J. Walker, Frank Hall, and Joe Wood, making the same claim. According to famed Billy the Kid and Lincoln County War researcher, author, and historian Philip J. Rash, in a letter dated August 7, 1954, to William V. Morrison, quote, I've seen the articles in question, and as you well know, I'm an eternal skeptic. Nowhere in the article does your man Roberts make any statement, nor is he quoted as claiming to have been a member of the James Gang. Anyone with at least a general knowledge of the Dalton claim could easily tell that the reporter is mistaking James Davis for Roberts. No reputable historian would accept that as a reliable source. End quote. It should also be noted that the Stanton birthday party and the We the People appearance all happened between September of 1949 and January of 1950, when William V. Morrison was already preparing Roberts' application for pardon. So one can only logically presume that it would be incredibly unlikely that Roberts would make such a claim when he was in the process of trying to validate his claim to being Billy the Kid. Furthermore, whether you give any credence or not to the claim that J. Frank Dalton was the real Jesse James, consider the vast number of people who made statements in support of his claim. In addition to those already mentioned, like Robert Ruark, Joe Wood, Mary James, Al Jennings, Red Lucas, John William Pierce, Judge Henry Priest, Martillus Edwin Baldwin, W.B. Harvey, Annie Strain, George Washington Gibson, Harris Campbell, and John Oliver Johnston, among many others. The point being, whether you believe Dalton's claim or not, these people did, and whether Dalton was Jesse James or not doesn't mean these people were liars or weren't who they claimed to be. Despite the fact that the James Gang claim has been soundly rejected by most serious researchers and historians, the claim persists, usually appearing on internet message boards, video comment sections, and even Wikipedia. The question is, why has this baseless claim persisted? The answer is due to the rise of the neo-historian. The neo-historian is a person who reads one or two books or articles, or perhaps watches one or two documentaries, which usually only present one side of a position, argument, or claim, declares themselves an expert, and rushes off to post their proclamations to the masses, usually anonymously. The neo-historian usually only accepts online sources that can be found in 12 keystrokes or less. They never entered a library, let alone examined a university or private archive collection. They demand multiple sources for even the slightest claim that goes against their position, but usually provide none in presenting their claims, nor do they require any source when any claim is presented that supports their position. In short, the truth really doesn't matter to the neo-historian, as getting it right is less important than being right. They have a win-at-all-cost mentality, and the truth be damned. Over the years, numerous books have been written about Dalton's claim, and not one single book, newspaper account, interview, etc., can a single quote be found made by Brushy Bill Roberts claiming to have been a member of the James Gang. Not one, period. Not in all my years of researching and studying Roberts' case have I ever encountered one. Not in any debate I've partaken have any supporter of the historical status quo ever been able to produce one. Ever. So, in summation, absolutely no evidence exists that Brushy Bill Roberts ever claimed to have been a member of the James Gang, and the evidence overwhelmingly shows that those who claim otherwise are doing so out of either ignorance or deceit.